Hey, this is Anthony Ceseri with SuccessForYourSongs.com, and in this interview I'm going to be talking to Sarah Popejoy, who's a songwriter who lived in Nashville for 10 years, writing and touring, and she also hosted an online acoustic music show called the Musicians Empowered Song Hour. And you can learn more about her at her website, which is musiciansempowered.com. Sarah, thanks for talking to me today.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for having me on the show.
Yeah, you got it. Can you start us off just by giving us a little bit about your background with songwriting?
Yes, I actually been writing for years, and just kind of and moved to Nashville to learn a little more, and that's where I believe I got a lot of my biggest learning curve was actually moving to Nashville, being around other songwriters. And then just, at first I was wanting to be, the type of songwriter who was like a staff writer, but then found myself performing more and more and really enjoying that. So that's when I started touring and doing that whole gig, and put out a couple albums and stuff, and got some college radio play and stuff like that.
Well, being in Nashville, how did you find that that's different as opposed to being somewhere else? What does that do for you as a songwriter being there?
Well, what's really great about Nashville is the community of songwriters. It's your learning curve is so much greater and faster when you're in a place like Nashville because of the fact that you're with other people and you're talking about it all the time, and it's in the news. It's you go to a coffee shop and you can hear the buzz just going, and so it's like your learning curve is just that much faster because you have so many more people to communicate with it about songwriting and the whole process, and just being able to watch people perform live as well is big too.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. When somebody's really good at something, and obviously there's a lot of really good songwriters in Nashville, you can just learn so much just from seeing what they do well,
And even just, by the way they interact with a crowd.
Right.
And even, I don't know, I think you get a little more by being there live than even seeing something on video.
That's true, yeah. There have been situations where there have been bands that I liked and I've seen them live and I'm just like, they were amazing, and I'll tell my friends and then maybe send them like a link to YouTube or something. But then, when I go to watch the thing on YouTube, a very similar performance just doesn't hold up, I guess, when it's in like two dimensions for some reason. There's
Right.
something different about being there and from a performance aspect. You just don't get the same feel from when you're doing it live.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you mentioned you were thinking about doing the staff writing thing, and then you ended up performing. Do you think there's a difference as an actual writer when you're writing for somebody else, or if you're planning on performing your own music?
I believe there's a total difference. Because as I think when you're writing for yourself, it's you kind of have a little more free reign to be a little more personal and a little more or less generic. Partly because you're performing them live and you can tell stories behind the songs that kind of add to the flavor of it. Or just and then staff writing is just a little more. It's a lot more structured and there's not as much free reign, I feel like, because they tend to want to have a pretty, occasionally a song will get out that you'll hear on the radio that has an unusual structured format, but for the most part, they're going to want that pretty basic, generic, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus type thing going on.
Right.
And whereas, you can kind of play around with formats, and it's not as important to be so structured or to be so, I would say, vague. Vague's probably not the best word for it, but you can't be as specific when you're writing for other people because it doesn't mean, anything to them.
Yeah, you're probably getting involved in doing more, or if you know who you're writing for anyway, you're probably getting involved with doing more research, about that person and what they might be about or what their fans are about or something like that, as opposed to having a song.
Well,
Go ahead.
and and another thing that was kind of annoying to me when I was in Nashville is there was and I don't know if as much, I can't speak for nowadays if it's going on as much, but I mean, there was a lot of talk of, you would have artists, because here you've got your publishing companies who are making money and you have your record companies making money. And this didn't used to be the case, but all of a sudden record companies started catching on that, hey, we're losing a cut from what these publishing companies are making. So what they started doing is they started sending in their artists who, not every single artist is like this. There's a lot of really, really good writers. Like, I know Taylor Swift writes her own stuff. There's other people who write their own stuff, but they were starting to send in people who weren't really writers. And, it's basically kind of a rule in Nashville that if you're in the room, you're part of the song. Well, they were kind of taking advantage of that rule, of that creative process, and just sticking in artists who really did not write at all, and they weren't really that involved in the process. And so it was kind of annoying because, now they're getting a cut of a song they didn't really put that much effort into.
Right.
And it didn't happen with everybody, but it was happening a lot.
Gotcha. Well, when you're in that, like a group environment like that, do you recommend like co-writing? Do you find that's a beneficial thing? I mean, I know you mentioned earlier about, being able to learn from people when they're performing and stuff. Do you feel that same thing happens when you're writing with other people who, you respect their writing style?
Oh, most definitely. And I recommend writing with all different types of people too, because even, just because everybody has their own approach with songwriting, it's you learn so much more about the process when you co-write with other people and you find their perspective and how they approach the whole songwriting process. And it's a good way to beef up your songwriting as well, and networking.
Yeah. I think too also, like, a lot of times if you have areas where you're not as strong and somebody else is strong, and maybe if you're a great lyric writer and okay at melodies and somebody else is the opposite of that, like, that could be a great way to put together a great song.
Yeah, and it's that too, and sometimes and then you've also got to have that element of chemistry.
Right.
It's funny because you can have a great melody writer and a great lyric writer if you don't have the chemistry there. But that is a great point, that finding people who are have strengths where you're weak is a good way to really write some great songs.
Yeah, and I think the chemistry thing's important too, since you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people are afraid to get into co-writing because, what if, it's mostly my idea, or what if the person I'm writing with, doesn't work out. But I think it's just like anything else. You just try it out with some people and it may work with them, it may not, I mean, it's just going to be like hit or miss like anything else. But when you find someone who you do have that chemistry with, it's worth all the ones that didn't work,
Oh yeah, most definitely. And the thing is too, you can't get all caught up in like, your ideas and all this stuff. But I mean, of course, like if you've got this totally great idea, that you're wanting to create a song off of, I don't recommend, the very first co-write you ever have with somebody who you've never met before,
Right.
You may not want to share that particular idea because you don't even know how you'll work together. But but people, songwriters can get caught up in worrying about people stealing this or that, and I think there's a greater percentage of fear there than there is actual reality.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And I just wanted to go back to what you were talking about performance wise and watching other performers, because you mentioned too quickly about telling stories between songs. Is that something that or telling stories about the songs, I guess I should say, between songs, because I think that's something that can be tricky, is what do you do between songs? So is that something that you found works well, is to sort of tell a story about how you wrote a particular song before you perform that song?
Yeah, you don't have to do it every time, but sometimes it can fill up a lot of a lot of air, because sometimes when you're performing, um, you'd be surprised how quickly you can run through even 10 to 20 songs. So it, and besides the time issue, setting it up makes it more personal to people, and they tend to listen a little more when you do set up a song like that, because they want to hear what you're talking about. And I just found that it's I don't know, it's just a good icebreaker, makes things more personal. I know when I've watched other songwriters, I remember watching Sean Colvin and her telling a story behind a song that I really wasn't even that crazy about the song, and now it's one of my favorite songs because she's told the story about it. So
Yeah, and I think probably an important distinction to make is, what's interesting to people is the story of how the song came about. But probably what you don't want to be relying on is, if you feel like your lyrics aren't strong and you're using that opportunity to explain what the song is about, because you want your lyrics to be self-explanatory. You don't want to say like, well, I'll explain that beforehand. What's interesting to people is the process, how it came about, and why you wrote that song, not like,
Yeah, it should just add to it. It shouldn't be a supplement for it.
Right.
Totally agree.
Cool. So what about songwriting competitions? Do you approach writing for a competition the same way as you would write any other songs? Like, have you submitted songs that you've already written, or do you write specifically for a competition? How do you feel works best with competitions?
Well, competitions are good, but I don't really write for competitions, because I feel like I should write and then I just send my best stuff.
Right.
But I guess if you have a certain competition that's looking for something specific, then you might be writing for it. But I just to me, it's all about the process and communicating with people. And then I have entered contests before and stuff, and entered Billboard and won honorable mention or something. I don't know. That was years and years and years ago. But it's just I say I don't really write for contests. And another thing is, I think contests are great. I'm not dissing contests, but I don't think that it should be people's main goal, because I think that I think even, I've known people who've won contests like, the John Lennon and everything, and it's great, and you can win money and prizes and everything, but I don't know. I guess it's just me personally has never been my main focus. It's always been the connection with the audience. So, and if you're connecting with them, then you'll connect with whoever's listening on the other side, judging those contests.
Yeah, and I guess a nice bonus to that too is it's something, even if you get an award or something like that, it's something you could put up on your website or something.
Yeah,
if you're building a fan base.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest benefit right there, is being able to, advertise it.
Yeah, or at least if it's one of the competitions that everybody knows about, like the John Lennon or the one of those, because if it's just just like out of the group of my friends, it's like it has to have like some kind of, like, people see it, they recognize it.
Yeah, I think Billboard's not even around anymore.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think that is an important thing, like from a marketing standpoint for yourself, to be able to say, because you're always looking for that thing that sort of gives you an edge when.
It people recognize the name, and then they say, oh, this is someone I should listen to because they won such and such contest. So yeah, it's definitely social proof. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So what is your process when you put together a song? Like, what do you start with? Some people start with lyrics or melody. What do you find works well, or do you constantly varying how you do it?
Well, the lyrics usually come to me first, but words are more my strong point than melody, I would say, but so usually it's a line, or sometimes it's even a general idea. And then sometimes it's even, I don't know, sometimes I see things visually that become songs. I know that sounds weird, but I'm a painter, so
Mm.
sometimes I process things visually as well, and so uh, it's just a lot of times it's different with every song.
When you talk about visually, are you talking about in your mind's eye or something that you actually see happening?
Uh, like in my mind's eye.
Gotcha.
Like for instance, I mean, I know this sounds weird or crazy, but like all of us creative people, but one time I just had this like inside my head, a picture of a kaleidoscope, and so I thought about how I know this is kind of heady, but I thought about how our lives kind of change like a kaleidoscope and the different colors and how they change, and so I wrote a song that off of that.
Yeah, that's really cool. And actually, I think if that is the way you do things, if you see pictures that become words, I mean, I think most of the times it's usually to your benefit to get these things out, even if you don't finalize a song, but at least start to
Yeah.
get the ideas out so that they're there. But if you don't do that, if you can't, you still need to take that image and get it down into words and at least have it for when you're gonna go back to it. Because I mean, I guess you can paint a picture of it as your inspiration, but you're gonna want to have something to reference when it's time to write the song. Although, like I said, having said that, it's usually best to act on these things.
I
You usually seem to get the most ideas.
I also believe too that a big part of the process that's not really always maybe talked about is I believe in songwriting there's also this internalizing process of emotions and things that we go through, and sometimes even when we're not songwriting I still feel that we're songwriting because we're internalizing those things and those thoughts and those ideas.
So you're talking about taking
Like,
taking emotions that you might feel and turning them into a song. Is that what you mean?
well, yeah, like for instance, for several months I had this idea of the song "Honorable Man," and it was basically it was and uh, from Julius Caesar and in Mark Antony's speech when he was saying, "So they all honorable men." But anyways, but he was being facetious in the speech, and so I just kept stirring around on this idea, and then it was like there were emotions from my past that eventually surfaced, and then one morning it came out. But the idea had to kind of roll around in my head and inside before it ever really came out as a song.
So when it's in that space between coming out of a song and just being something that you're not sure about, is there any way to make a note? Are you making notes like during that sort of in between stage, or is it just like all come to you one day and then you go from there?
Basically, just all come to me one day.
Gotcha.
Like, you know, it's just like maybe I'll get stuck on an idea.
Right. Cool. Well, I think you've given us some cool things to think about in regard to just writing better songs and being more creative.
Anthony, thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Bye bye.